The first letter was written on a Tuesday evening in November, when the rain had been falling softly against the windows of the little house on Willow Street. Ethan had always liked rainy nights. There was something peaceful about them. The sound of water against the glass made the world feel farther away, as if the streets, cars, and restless voices outside had disappeared beneath a quiet blanket. He sat alone at the kitchen table with an old wooden box in front of him. The box belonged to his mother. She had left it behind when she passed away 3 years earlier, and Ethan had never found the courage to open it. Until that night. Inside were dozens of envelopes. Some were yellow with age. Some were perfectly white. A few had Ethan's name written across them in handwriting he didn't recognize. But one envelope caught his attention. It was addressed simply, "For Ethan, when you're ready." He held it for several minutes before opening it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Ethan unfolded it carefully. "My dear Ethan, there are things people say too late. There are words we keep inside because we are afraid of what they might change. And sometimes, by the time we understand what we should have said, the person who needed to hear it is already gone. If you are reading this, I hope you are old enough to understand that silence can become its own kind of story. I left something for you in the box. Not money, not jewelry, letters. Letters I wrote to people I loved but never had the courage to send. I want you to read them, not because they belong to me, but because one of them may remind you of something you have forgotten." Ethan stopped reading. Rain whispered against the window. He looked at the pile of envelopes again. There were more than 50. Each one had a name. A few names were familiar. Some were strangers. And one name made his heart suddenly stop. Sarah. He hadn't heard that name in 12 years. Sarah had been his best friend in high school, his first love, the person who knew every dream he had before he knew how to speak about them. Then, one summer morning, she disappeared from his life. No goodbye, no explanation, just silence. Ethan had spent years telling himself that he had moved on. But now, staring at her name written in his mother's handwriting, he realized something. Maybe he hadn't. He slowly picked up the envelope. For the first time in 12 years, Ethan wondered where Sarah was, and why his mother had written her a letter. He turned the envelope over. There was one final sentence written on the back. "Before you read this, remember that some doors are better opened slowly." Ethan smiled faintly. Then he opened the letter. Ethan held the letter in both hands and carefully unfolded it. For a moment, he didn't read the words. He simply stared at the handwriting. It was his mother's handwriting, but something about the letter felt different from the one he had just read. The lines were uneven, as though she had written them while her hands were shaking. "My dear Sarah, I don't know if you will ever read this. Perhaps that is why I am finally brave enough to write it. You probably don't remember me very well. You were young when you last stood in our kitchen, and Ethan was even younger in the ways that mattered. But I remember you. I remember how you looked at him when you thought nobody was watching. I remember the afternoon you sat on our porch crying because your father had decided to move your family across the country. And I remember the promise Ethan made that evening. He said he would wait for you. He was 17. He believed promises could hold people together across any distance. Life taught him otherwise." Ethan stopped. He looked toward the dark kitchen window. 12 years ago, he had remembered that summer very differently. He remembered Sarah standing beside her family's old blue station wagon. He remembered her hugging him. He remembered her saying, "Don't forget me." And he remembered promising that he never would. But there was something he had forgotten. Something he had buried so deeply that even now it returned only as a faint feeling. His mother continued, "Sarah, Ethan never received your last letter. I know because I found it. I found it the morning after your family left. It had fallen behind the mailbox, soaked by the rain. I opened it because I was afraid it contained something important. It did. You told him you loved him. You told him you were scared. And you asked him to come find you someday. But the address was missing. Only your name was written. I wanted to give it to him. I truly did. But Ethan was already breaking. and I was afraid that giving him those words without knowing where you were would make the pain worse. So I kept it. I told myself I would give it to him when the time was right. The time never came. Ethan's breathing became slow and heavy. He read the final line. Forgive me. The letter slipped from his fingers. For 12 years, Ethan had believed Sarah had forgotten him. For 12 years, he had believed her silence was a choice. Now he understood. Maybe it had never been silence. Maybe it had been a letter that never arrived. Ethan looked at the wooden box again. There were dozens of envelopes still waiting, and suddenly he wasn't sure he wanted to know what the next one contained. Ethan stayed at the kitchen table long after midnight. The rain had stopped, but drops still slipped from the roof and tapped softly against the window. He picked up the next envelope. Then he put it down. There was no reason to continue. At least that was what he told himself. But the wooden box seemed to hold a quiet gravity, pulling him toward the past one letter at a time. Eventually, he reached for another envelope. This one had no name on the front, only a date. August 14th, 12 years earlier. Ethan opened it carefully. Inside was a photograph. He recognized the place immediately, the old train station at the edge of town. In the picture, Sarah stood beside a wooden bench, wearing a faded blue jacket. Her hair was blowing across her face, and she was smiling at whoever had taken the photograph. On the back, his mother's handwriting said, "She came back." Ethan's heart tightened. He turned the photograph over again, as if another answer might appear. Then he noticed something in the background. A clock. The time was 6:40. He remembered that day, August 14th. He had been sitting in his bedroom, angry and heartbroken, believing Sarah had already forgotten him. But if the photograph was real, she had returned. He hurried to the box and searched through the envelopes. Another letter, then another. Most were from his mother, but beneath them was a small folded piece of paper. Ethan opened it. There were only 6 words. I waited until 6:40. His hands began to tremble. He knew exactly what that meant. The train station, 6:40. Sarah had waited for him, and he had never gone. For years, Ethan had blamed her for leaving. For years, he had carried a quiet sadness that he believed belonged entirely to her. But perhaps they had both been waiting. 2 people standing on opposite sides of the same unfinished story. Ethan stood and walked toward the hallway. He stopped beside an old cabinet where his mother had kept family photographs. He opened the bottom drawer. Inside were things he hadn't touched since childhood. School certificates, old birthday cards, a broken watch, and a small notebook. He opened it. On the first page, his mother's handwriting appeared again. I should have told him the truth. Ethan sat on the floor. For the first time that night, he felt something stronger than sadness. He felt fear, because if his mother had hidden the truth about Sarah, there had to be a reason. And if Sarah had really come back 12 years ago, then Ethan needed to know where she had gone afterward. He turned the page. At the bottom, beneath a date and a single sentence, was an address. His heart stopped. It was not far away. In fact, it was only 2 hours from his house. And beneath the address were 3 words. She still lives. Ethan stared at the address until the numbers began to blur. 2 hours. That was all. For 12 years, he had imagined Sarah somewhere far away, living a life he could never reach. And yet she had been closer than he ever knew. He folded the notebook and placed it inside his jacket. He didn't sleep that night. Before sunrise, Ethan made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the first pale light spread across Willow Street. He thought about calling someone, a friend, a relative, anyone who might tell him to slow down. But there was nobody. This was something he had to face alone. At 7 in the morning, he got into his car. The town slowly disappeared behind him as he followed the highway north. For the first hour, he barely spoke, though there was no one in the car to hear him. He kept thinking about the train station, 6:40, Sarah waiting, him never coming. At 9:18, he arrived in a small town surrounded by tall pine trees and quiet hills. The address led him to a narrow street lined with old houses. Ethan slowed down. Then he saw it. A white house with green shutters. There were flower pots beneath the windows and a wooden swing hanging from the porch. He pulled over across the street. For several minutes, he simply sat there. A woman stepped outside. She carried a basket of laundry. Ethan couldn't see her face clearly. Then she turned. His heart seemed to forget how to beat. It was Sarah. Older, of course. Her hair was longer. There were faint lines around her eyes. But he knew her instantly. She walked toward the clothesline and began hanging shirts beneath the morning sun. Ethan's hand tightened around the steering wheel. He could get out. He could cross the street. He could finally ask the question that had followed him for 12 years. Why did you leave? But before he could move, another car stopped in front of the house. A young boy jumped out. "Mom!" Sarah smiled. She knelt down and hugged him. Ethan watched silently. Then a man stepped out of the driver's side. He walked to Sarah and kissed her forehead. Sarah smiled at him too. Ethan looked away. For a moment, he felt foolish for coming. Whatever story had existed between them, Sarah had built another life. Family, a home, a future. He started the engine. But before he could drive away, Sarah suddenly looked across the street. Their eyes met. She froze. The basket slipped from her hands. Clothes scattered across the grass. And Ethan knew immediately. She remembered him. Sarah whispered something Ethan couldn't hear. Then she ran toward the road. Sarah stopped at the edge of the road. Ethan opened the car door, but neither of them moved. For a few seconds, the years between them seemed to disappear. They were 17 again. Two teenagers standing beneath a summer sky, afraid to say goodbye. Then Sarah whispered his name. Ethan. He hadn't heard her say it in 12 years. The sound reached somewhere inside him that he had kept locked away. "Hi, Sarah." Her eyes filled with tears. She crossed the street slowly. When she reached the car, she looked at him as if she were trying to make sure he was real. "I thought you hated me." Ethan shook his head. "I thought you forgot me." Sarah closed her eyes. "I waited for you." The words were almost, "You shouldn't have come." "I know." "Then why did you?" Ethan reached into his jacket and pulled out the old photograph. Sarah stared at it. Her expression changed immediately. "Where did you get that?" "My mother." Sarah's face became pale. "She kept it." "She kept a lot of things." Sarah slowly sat on the edge of the sidewalk. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she said, "Your mother wrote to me." Ethan looked at her. "What?" "After I left." Sarah wiped her eyes. "She told me you didn't want to hear from me." Ethan felt something cold move through his chest. "She told you that?" Sarah nodded. "She said you had decided to move on. She said you were angry with me for leaving without saying goodbye." "I never said that." "I know that now." Ethan looked at the house again. "Then why didn't you come back?" Sarah gave a small, sad smile. "Because I believed you had chosen not to." The silence between them felt heavier than before. Two people had spent 12 years living with the same misunderstanding, each believing the other had walked away. Then Sarah reached into her pocket. She pulled out a small, worn envelope. "I kept this all these years." Ethan recognized the handwriting immediately. His own. "What is it?" Sarah looked directly into his eyes. "Your last letter to me." Ethan's breath caught. "I never sent one." Sarah's expression became strangely gentle. "That's what I thought too." She held out the envelope. And Ethan realized there was still one part of the story his mother had never told him. Ethan stared at the envelope in Sarah's hand. His name was written across the front in his own handwriting, but he had never seen it before. "Where did you get this?" he asked. Sarah looked toward the house. "My father found it years ago." Ethan frowned. "Your father?" "He found it in an old box after we moved. He gave it to me when I turned 21. She hesitated. "I didn't open it for a long time." "Why?" "Because I was afraid." Ethan understood that feeling. He had been afraid for 12 years. Sarah slowly opened the envelope and removed the letter. "You wrote this the night before we left." Ethan shook his head. "I don't remember." "You don't have to." She handed it to him. His fingers trembled as he unfolded the paper. The handwriting was unmistakably his. "Dear Sarah, if you're reading this, you're probably already gone. I wanted to come to the station tomorrow, but I don't know if I can. I'm angry, not at you, at everything, at your father, at mine, at the distance between two people who don't want to say goodbye. But mostly, I'm scared. I'm scared that if I see you tomorrow, I'll ask you to stay. And if you stay, you'll spend your life wondering what might have happened if you had left. So maybe loving someone means letting them go. I hope you understand. I hope you forgive me. And if you ever come back, I promise I'll still remember you." Ethan stopped reading. The paper shook in his hands. Sarah watched him quietly. "I never received this," she said, "because I never sent it." "I know." They looked at each other. Then Ethan noticed something. The letter was unfinished. The final sentence ended halfway across the page. There was no signature. He remembered that night now. He had written the letter. Then his mother had entered his room. They had argued. She had taken the letter from his desk. And after that, everything became a blur. Ethan looked at Sarah. "My mother kept this too." Sarah nodded. "She gave it to my father. Why? I don't know." For a moment, the morning seemed strangely quiet. Then Sarah stood. "You should go." Ethan looked at her. "I came all this way. I know. After 12 years. I know. Don't you want to know what happened?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've spent 12 years wanting to know." She looked toward the porch where Noah was waiting. But some answers arrived too late. Ethan folded the letter. "Maybe." Sarah turned away. Then she stopped. Without looking back, she said quietly, "Your mother wasn't the only person keeping letters." Ethan froze. Sarah walked toward her house, and Ethan suddenly understood that the wooden box in his kitchen might contain only half of the truth. Ethan remained beside his car long after Sarah disappeared inside the house. The words she had left him with kept repeating in his mind. Your mother wasn't the only person keeping letters. He looked at the White House one last time before driving away. The road back home felt longer than before. When Ethan finally arrived, the afternoon light had already begun to fade. He went straight to the kitchen. The wooden box was still sitting on the table exactly where he had left it. He opened it again. This time he wasn't afraid. He emptied everything onto the table. Envelopes, photographs, old receipts, a birthday card, a newspaper clipping. Then something small fell from beneath the lining of the box. A brass key. Ethan picked it up. There was a tiny number engraved on it. 17. He turned the box upside down and examined the bottom. Nothing. Then he remembered something. His mother had owned a small storage unit outside town. She had mentioned it only once years ago after his father died. Ethan had completely forgotten about it. He grabbed his coat. 20 minutes later, he stood inside the dim storage facility. The manager searched the records and found his mother's name. Unit 17, the man said. Ethan's heart began beating faster. The lock was old. He inserted the brass key, turned. The door rolled upward with a long metallic sound. Inside were boxes stacked from floor to ceiling. Most were covered with dust. Ethan switched on the light. At the back of the unit sat a single wooden desk. On top of it was a sealed envelope. His name was written across it. Ethan walked closer. Under his name were 4 words. You deserve the whole truth. He opened it. Inside was a letter from his mother. My son, if you have found this, then I am no longer here to explain what I did. I know you will be angry. You should be. There are things I kept from you because I believed I was protecting you. But protection and control can look very similar when fear is involved. Sarah did come back. She came back more than once. And every time she carried a letter for you. I stopped her from giving them to you, not because I hated her, not because she had done anything wrong. I did it because your father was dying, and I was terrified that if you left to find her, you would lose the last chance to say goodbye to him. I thought I was choosing for you. I was wrong. Ethan lowered the letter. his father's illness, the hospital, the final weeks. He remembered how his mother had begged him to stay. But there was more. At the bottom of the page, his mother had written one final sentence. "There are 11 letters in this room. Sarah wrote all of them." Ethan slowly turned toward the boxes. 11 letters. 11 years. He took a breath. Then he began searching. Ethan found the first letter inside a box labeled with his father's name. The second was hidden beneath a stack of old photographs. The third was tucked inside a book Ethan remembered reading when he was a child. One by one, he placed them on the desk. 11 envelopes. 11 pieces of a life he had believed was finished. He sat down and opened the first. "Ethan, I came back today. I stood outside your house for almost an hour, but your mother told me you were with your father at the hospital. I wanted to wait. I wanted to see you, but she said you didn't want me there, so I left." Ethan closed his eyes. The second letter was dated 3 months later. "I saw you today. You were driving past the coffee shop. I almost ran after you, but you looked happy. I thought maybe you had finally forgotten me." The third letter came a year later. "I got married today. I don't know why I'm telling you. Maybe because some part of me still feels like I owe you the truth. I love my husband, but there is a small room inside my heart where your name still lives." Ethan stopped reading. He stared at the page for a long time. Then he opened the fourth. "I had a son. His name is Noah. The first time I held him, I wondered what kind of father you would have become. I hated myself for thinking it. Then I realized that remembering someone isn't betrayal. It is simply remembering." The fifth letter was shorter. "Are you happy, Ethan? I hope you are, even if I'm not part of your happiness." The sixth was written several years later. "I found an old photograph of us today. We looked so young. I wish I could tell those two kids that life doesn't always end where they think it will. Sometimes people leave. Sometimes they return. And sometimes the hardest thing is accepting that both can be true." Ethan wiped his eyes. He reached for the seventh envelope. But before opening it, he noticed something strange. The handwriting had changed. The letters were still Sarah's, but the paper was newer. The date was only 6 months old. Ethan's heart began pounding. He opened it. "Ethan, I don't know if this letter will ever reach you, but I recently learned something about your mother. Something she never told either of us. I think you should know. There was one more person involved in what happened 12 years ago. Someone who knew about every letter. Someone who knew where you were. Someone who had a reason to keep us apart. I don't know if they are still hiding the truth, but I finally found their name." Ethan read the final line twice. Then he looked at the bottom of the page. There was a single name, his father's name. Ethan read his father's name again. For several seconds, he couldn't move. His father had been dead for 8 years. There was no way he could ask him what happened. Yet somehow, the truth had been waiting inside this room all along. Ethan opened the 8th letter. "Ethan, I found out something about your father. I don't know how much he told you about the summer we separated, but he knew about us. He knew about the letters, and he knew I came back." Ethan's eyes moved quickly across the page. "Your father met me at the train station, the day I returned. He told me you were with him. He said you were angry with me. He said you didn't want to see me. I believed him. I shouldn't have." Ethan leaned back in the chair. His father had never mentioned Sarah. Not once. Not during all the years afterward. The next paragraph made his hands go cold. "He asked me to leave you alone. He said you had a future ahead of you. He said I would only confuse you." I remember asking him why he cared so much. He didn't answer. He only said, "Because Ethan needs to learn how to let go." Ethan closed the letter. The storage unit suddenly felt too small. He remembered his father as a quiet man. Strict sometimes, distant often, but he had never imagined him deliberately standing between two people. Then Ethan remembered something else. A sentence his father had once said. "You can't spend your life waiting for someone who chose to leave." At 17, Ethan had believed those words were about Sarah. Now he wondered whether his father had known exactly what he was doing. He opened the 9th letter. This one contained a photograph. Sarah and Ethan stood together beside the old train station. On the back was a date, the same day she had returned. But there was something else. Written underneath the date were 4 words. "Your father kept this." Ethan turned the photograph over again. A small envelope was attached to the back. Inside was a handwritten note. "I didn't know whether to tell you, but I think you deserve the truth now. Your father didn't just stop my letters. He received one from me every year. He answered them." Ethan's heart dropped. His father had written back to Sarah? He opened the 10th letter. There was only 1 page. I asked him why he never told you. He said he was afraid that if you knew the truth, you would hate him. Then came the final line. He told me something else, something I have never forgotten. He loves you more than he loves being right. Ethan sat silently. For the first time, his anger began to soften. His father had made a terrible choice, but perhaps it had come from fear, not cruelty. He reached for the 11th letter. The envelope was sealed with an old piece of tape. Written across the front were 6 words. "Read this only when you are ready." Ethan stared at it. Then he slowly broke the seal. The 11th letter was different from the others. There was no date, no explanation, only Ethan's name. He unfolded the paper slowly. "My dear Ethan, if you are reading this, then you have finally discovered what I tried so hard to hide. I don't expect you to forgive me. Maybe you shouldn't. But there is something you need to understand about your father. He wasn't the only person who made mistakes. I did too. When Sarah first came back, your father asked me to keep her away from you. I agreed. At the time, your father was very sick, and I was terrified of losing him. I thought that if you stayed close to him, you would have more time together. I convinced myself that I was protecting our family. But every time Sarah came back, I made the same choice. I told her you didn't want to see her. I told you she had moved on. And every year, another letter disappeared into this box. I became the keeper of a story that never belonged to me. Then, shortly before your father died, he asked me something I will never forget. He asked whether I had ever given you Sarah's letters. I told him no. He closed his eyes and said, "Then we have both failed him." That was the first time I understood the size of our mistake. Your father wanted me to tell you everything, but I was afraid. Afraid you would hate him. Afraid you would hate me. Afraid that after all those years, the truth would hurt more than the lie. So I waited and waited until waiting became the only thing I knew how to do. There is one final thing you need to know. Sarah does not know this part. Your father left something for you. Not in this storage unit. Not in the house. He gave it to someone before he died. And he asked that it be returned only when you were ready to hear the truth. Ethan, I am sorry for every letter I kept. For every question I answered with silence. For every year I allowed you to believe that someone you loved had forgotten you. Sometimes we think we can protect the people we love by choosing their pain for them. But pain chosen by someone else is still pain. I hope you understand that someday. Ethan lowered the letter. The storage unit was completely silent. Outside, evening had arrived. He looked at the 11 envelopes scattered across the desk. For 12 years, he had believed his story ended at a train station. Now he understood that it had never ended. It had simply continued without him. He folded the letter and placed it carefully inside his jacket. Then he noticed a small piece of paper beneath the desk. It had been hidden under the leg almost deliberately. Ethan picked it up. There was an address, and beneath it, a single sentence written in his father's handwriting. She knows where the last letter is. Ethan stared at the words. Then he realized who she had to be. Sarah. And somewhere in her house was the final letter his father had never allowed him to read. Ethan drove back to Sarah's town the following morning. He had barely slept. The address from his father's note was folded inside his pocket, though he already knew where it would lead. Sarah's house. When he arrived, Noah was riding a bicycle along the driveway. Sarah stood on the porch with a cup of coffee. She looked surprised to see him again. You came back. Ethan nodded. I found something. Sarah put the cup down. About your father? Yes. Her expression changed. Ethan took out the small piece of paper. My father wrote this. Sarah read the words. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she walked inside. Ethan followed. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books. Sarah led him to a quiet room at the back. There was a wooden cabinet against the wall. She opened the bottom drawer and removed a small metal box. I've had this for 12 years. Ethan stared at it. Why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know whether you would ever want to hear the truth. She placed the box on the table. Inside was one envelope. Ethan recognized the handwriting immediately. His father's. He looked at Sarah. What is it? I don't know. You never opened it? No. Why? Sarah gave a quiet smile. Because it wasn't mine. Ethan sat down. His hands felt strangely calm now. After everything he had discovered, the fear was gone. He opened the envelope. The letter was short. Ethan, if you are reading this, then I have finally run out of time. There are things a father wants to teach his son. How to be strong, how to work hard, how to protect the people you love. But I taught you something I never should have. I taught you that losing someone means letting them disappear. That was my fear speaking, not wisdom. Sarah loved you. You loved her. I knew it, and I was afraid. I was afraid that if you left with her, I would lose my son before I was ready. So I made decisions that were mine to make, not yours. I told myself I was protecting you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. If I could go back, I would tell you to get on that train. I would tell you to follow her. I would tell you that love is not something a parent gets to choose for their child. And I would tell you one more thing. Never let fear write the letters that belong to your heart. Ethan stopped reading. His vision blurred. At the bottom of the page was one final sentence. Go home, Ethan. Then decide what you want your next letter to say. He folded the paper. Sarah sat quietly across from him. Neither spoke. After a while, Ethan looked at her. I don't know what happens now. Sarah smiled sadly. Neither do I. Outside, Noah laughed as he rode past the window. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel like he was standing at the end of something. He felt as though he were standing at the beginning. And perhaps that was the strange thing about unfinished letters. Sometimes they didn't ask to be answered. Ethan returned home that evening with the last letter folded carefully inside his jacket. For the first time in 12 years, the house did not feel empty. Felt quiet. There was a difference. He placed the letters across the kitchen table and read them again, one by one. Each page carried a different version of the past. Sarah's version, his mother's version, his father's version, and somewhere between all three was the truth. Ethan went upstairs and opened the closet where he kept old belongings. At the very back was a small cardboard box. He had not opened it since he was 17. Inside was a photograph of Sarah, a movie ticket, a faded blue friendship bracelet, and a blank sheet of paper. He smiled when he saw it. For years, he had wondered why he had kept that empty page. Now he understood. He sat on the floor beside the window and began writing. Sarah, I don't know how to begin. There are 12 years I could write about. 12 years of anger, questions, memories, and things I thought I understood. But tonight, none of those things seem as important as one simple truth. I missed you. He stopped, then continued. I don't know what our lives would have looked like if we had found each other sooner. Maybe we would have stayed together. Maybe we wouldn't have. Maybe we would have discovered that the people we were at 17 were not the people we became. And maybe that's okay, because I don't want to go back. I want to know who you are now. I want to know about Noah. I want to know what makes you laugh, what scares you, what dreams you gave up, what dreams you still have. I don't want to rewrite the past. I only want to stop letting the past decide the future. Ethan paused. Outside, the evening sky had turned deep blue. He finished the letter. Tomorrow I'll bring this to you, not because I expect anything. Not because I want to take anything away from the life you've built. I just want to give you something nobody gave us 12 years ago. The truth. He folded the paper. Then he placed it inside an envelope. For the first time in his life, he wrote Sarah's name on the front without wondering whether she would ever see it. The next morning, Ethan drove back to her town. When he arrived, Sarah was sitting on the porch. She looked at the envelope in his hand. "What's that?" Ethan smiled. "A letter." Sarah looked at him for a moment. Then she moved over on the wooden swing. "Come sit." Ethan sat beside her. Neither of them opened the letter. They simply watched the morning sunlight move slowly across the yard. And for once, neither of them was waiting for the past to change. They were simply letting the future arrive. They sat together on the porch for nearly an hour before Sarah finally opened Ethan's letter. She read it slowly. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes her eyes filled with tears. When she reached the final line, she folded the paper and held it against her chest. "I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything." Sarah looked at him. "That's not true." Ethan smiled. "You've had 12 years to think about it." She laughed softly. It was the same laugh he remembered from high school, though it sounded older now. "You're still terrible at making things easier." "I know." For a moment, they both looked toward the yard. Noah was drawing something with chalk on the driveway. Sarah finally spoke. "After my father died, I found another box." Ethan turned toward her. "It had letters from your mother." "My mother?" Sarah nodded. "She wrote to me for years." Ethan frowned. "What did they say?" "Mostly apologies." Sarah looked down at her hands. "But there was one letter that was different." "What did it say?" "She told me that you had started asking questions." Ethan felt a strange chill. "When?" "About 2 years after I left." Sarah reached inside the house and returned with a small notebook. She opened it to a marked page. "Your mother wrote that you had found an old photograph of us." Ethan remembered. He had been 16. No, 17. The memory suddenly returned. He had asked his mother where Sarah had gone. His mother had said, "She's happy somewhere else." Ethan had believed her. Sarah continued, "Your mother wrote that you were thinking about finding me. Why didn't she tell me where you were?" "I don't know." Ethan looked at the notebook. Then he noticed another entry. The date was only a few weeks before his mother died. He read it silently. Sarah watched his face. "What does it say?" Ethan swallowed. "It says she finally found your address." Sarah's eyes widened. "When?" 3 years ago." Neither spoke. 3 years. His mother had known where Sarah lived before she died. And yet she had never told him. Ethan closed the notebook. Why would she do that? Sarah looked toward the quiet street. "Maybe she was waiting for you to find the letters yourself." "Why?" "Because she knew that if she told you, you might only blame her." Ethan looked at the letter in Sarah's hands. Perhaps that was the final lesson hidden inside the wooden box. Truth could be delayed. Love could be misunderstood. People could make terrible choices while believing they were protecting one another. But eventually, every unfinished story demanded an ending. Sarah touched the edge of his letter. "What happens now?" Ethan looked at her. "I don't know." She smiled. Good. Maybe not knowing is better than pretending we do." Ethan laughed. For the first time, the past felt lighter. Not gone. Not forgiven completely. Just lighter. The following weeks passed quietly. Ethan and Sarah did not try to recreate the life they had lost. Instead, they began learning the lives they had. They talked in the evenings, sometimes for an hour, sometimes until midnight. Sarah told him about Noah's first steps, her husband's love of old fishing boats, and the small bookstore she had opened with a friend. Ethan told her about his work, his father's final years, and all the ordinary days that had somehow become important only after they were gone. They never spoke about becoming what they had once been. Neither of them needed to. One Sunday afternoon, Sarah invited Ethan to the bookstore. It was a narrow little building with wooden floors and tall windows. Dusty sunlight fell across shelves filled with old novels and children's books. Ethan walked slowly through the aisles. "You always wanted a place like this," he said. Sarah looked surprised. You remember? You told me when we were 17. She smiled. I forgot I ever said that. I didn't. She reached for a book and placed it on a nearby table. Maybe that's why I'm glad you came back. Ethan looked at her. Why? Because sometimes we forget who we were before life became complicated. They stood quietly between the shelves. Then Ethan noticed a small wooden box behind the counter. His heart skipped. Another box? Sarah laughed. No, just old receipts. He smiled. Good. That evening, before leaving, Sarah handed him a small envelope. This is for you. Ethan looked at the handwriting. It was Sarah's. He opened it when he got home. Inside was only one page. Ethan, I spent 12 years believing our story ended because we were too young. Then I spent years believing it ended because we were too far apart. Now I think neither was true. Our story simply stopped being written. Maybe that is different. Maybe some stories don't end. They wait, not for the past to return, but for two people to become brave enough to continue them differently. Ethan read the letter twice. Then he placed it beside the others. For the first time, he understood why his mother had kept all those letters. They were not simply secrets. They were pieces of time. Proof that people could love each other and still make mistakes. Proof that silence could change lives. Proof that words mattered, even when they arrived years too late. Ethan walked to his desk and opened a fresh notebook. At the top of the first page, he wrote, "Things I should have said." Then he began. He wrote about his father, about forgiveness, about Sarah, about the boy he had been, and about the man he wanted to become. He didn't know where the notebook would lead. He didn't know what the future would look like. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid of an unfinished page. He was grateful for it, because an unfinished page meant there was still something left to write. Winter arrived slowly that year. The trees along Willow Street became bare, and the evenings grew colder. Ethan continued writing in his notebook. Some nights he wrote only a few sentences. Other nights he filled several pages. He wrote about memories he had avoided for years. He wrote about his father without anger. He wrote about his mother without pretending she had done the right thing. And sometimes he wrote about Sarah, not about the girl she had been, about the woman she had become. One evening, Ethan received a call from Sarah. Her voice sounded different. "Can you come over? Is everything okay?" "I don't know." He drove to her house. Sarah was sitting on the porch, holding an old envelope. When Ethan approached, she stood. "I found this in my father's things." She handed it to him. The envelope was addressed to his mother. Ethan opened it. Inside was a letter dated 12 years earlier. It was from Sarah's father. "Dear Mrs. Carter, I know what you have done. I know you kept Sarah's letters from Ethan. I also know why, but you should understand something. My daughter does not need to be protected from heartbreak. She needs the chance to choose her own life. I have made the same mistake. I told Sarah that Ethan had moved on because I was afraid she would throw away her future for a boy she loved at 17. Perhaps I was wrong. Perhaps we both were. If you truly love your son, give him the truth. Let him decide what to do with it." Ethan lowered the letter. He knew. Sarah nodded. "Everyone knew except us." They sat quietly. After a while, Sarah said, "I used to hate my father." Ethan looked at her. "Do you still?" She shook her head. "No. Why not?" "Because eventually I realized he was afraid." Ethan looked toward the dark road. "My father was afraid too." Sarah smiled sadly. "Maybe that's what parents do sometimes." "What?" "They make decisions because they love us, and then they spend years wishing they had trusted us instead." A cold breeze moved through the trees. Ethan folded the letter. "I think I understand my father now." Sarah looked at him. "Do you forgive him?" Ethan took a long breath. "Not all at once." She nodded. "That's probably more honest." They sat together until the porch light came on automatically. Then Ethan noticed something tucked beneath the envelope. A small photograph. He turned it over. It showed Sarah and Ethan at 17. But behind them stood 3 adults. his mother, Sarah's father, and Ethan's father. They were all looking at the camera. On the back, someone had written, "We thought we knew what was best." Ethan stared at the photograph. Then he smiled faintly. "Maybe that's the whole story." Sarah looked at him. "No," she took his hand. "It's only the part we inherited." She looked toward the quiet street. "The rest is ours." And for the first time, Ethan believed her. By early spring, Ethan had stopped counting the days since he first opened his mother's wooden box. The letters were no longer scattered across his kitchen table. He had placed them in a small cedar drawer beside his desk, arranged carefully by date. Some evenings, he would take one out and read it again. Not because he wanted to remember the pain, because he wanted to remember how easily people could misunderstand one another. One Saturday morning, Sarah called. "I found something else." Ethan smiled. "Another letter?" "No." She paused. "A key." An hour later, Ethan arrived at the bookstore. Sarah was waiting behind the counter with a small brass key in her palm. "I found it inside my father's old desk," she said. Ethan turned it over. There was a number engraved on it. 17. He stared at Sarah. "The storage unit." She nodded. "But why would my father have a key to your father's things?" "I don't know." They drove together to the old storage facility. Unit 17 had been rented under Sarah's father's name. Inside were boxes covered in dust. Most contained ordinary things: old tax papers, photographs, books, tools. Then Sarah found a small wooden chest. The key opened it. Inside was a bundle of letters tied together with faded string. Ethan's heart sank. There were dozens, but these were different. They were written by his father, to Sarah's father. The first letter was dated 13 years earlier. "I know what you are trying to do. You believe keeping them apart will protect them. I believed the same thing, but I am beginning to wonder whether we are protecting them or ourselves." Ethan looked at Sarah. She was crying quietly. He continued reading. The next letter was written months later. Ethan asked about Sarah today. He pretended he wasn't asking. "I told him she was happy. I watched his face change when I said it. I have never hated myself more." Another letter followed. "I thought time would make things easier. It hasn't. Every year I tell myself I will tell him. Every year I find another reason to wait." Then came the final letter. It was dated only 2 weeks before Ethan's father died. "If our children ever find these letters, I hope they understand one thing. We were wrong, not because we didn't love them, because we loved them so much that we became afraid of losing them. And fear made us selfish." Ethan folded the letter. For a long time, he and Sarah stood in silence. Then Sarah said, "I think this is where the story should have ended." Ethan looked at her. "Maybe." She shook her head. "No, I mean the story our parents were writing for us." Ethan smiled. He took her hand. "We get to write the next part." Outside, sunlight fell across the pavement. They carried the letters back to the car. Summer returned to Willow Street. The trees were green again, and the evenings stayed bright long after dinner. Ethan had begun visiting Sarah's bookstore every Saturday. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they worked quietly in separate corners. And sometimes they simply sat outside with coffee, listening to the sounds of the town. Nothing between them felt rushed. That was what Ethan appreciated most. They were no longer trying to recover the past. They were building something new. One afternoon, Ethan brought the cedar drawer from his house. Sarah looked at it and smiled. "You brought the letters." "All of them." They sat together on the bookstore floor and opened the drawer. For the first time, they read several of the old letters aloud. Some made them laugh. Some made them uncomfortable. Some left them sitting silently for several minutes afterward. Eventually, Sarah picked up the oldest letter, the one she had written at 17. "I never thought you'd hear this," she said. Ethan smiled. "I never thought I'd get to." She looked at him. "Do you regret it?" "Regret what?" "Coming here." Ethan thought about the question. He remembered the lonely years, the anger, the misunderstandings, the train station, the letters that had disappeared. Then he shook his head. No, Sarah looked relieved. Neither do I. They placed the letters back inside the drawer. But Ethan kept one envelope in his hand. It was blank. He turned it over. Then he looked at Sarah. I think we should do something. What? Write letters to ourselves. Sarah laughed. To ourselves? Yes. Why? So someday, when we're old, we can remember who we were right now. She thought about it, then nodded. They each took a sheet of paper. Ethan wrote slowly, Dear future me, if you're reading this, I hope you remember how peaceful this afternoon felt. I hope you remember that life didn't turn out exactly as you imagined. I hope you learned that some things cannot be repaired, but they can be understood. And I hope you never again confuse silence with peace. He stopped writing. Across the room, Sarah was still writing. When she finished, she folded her letter and sealed it. Neither read the others. They placed both envelopes inside the cedar drawer. Then Ethan closed it. Sarah rested her head against his shoulder. Outside, the bookstore windows reflected the golden evening light. I think my father was wrong about one thing, she said. What? He thought our story was something that happened when we were young. Ethan smiled. Maybe it was. Sarah looked up at him. But maybe he was wrong about where it ended. Ethan looked toward the fading sunlight. For years, he had believed the past was a locked room. Now he understood that it was only a room he had been afraid to enter. And once he finally opened the door, he discovered something unexpected. There had never been a perfect ending waiting inside. Only a chance to begin again. Years later, Ethan would still remember that summer afternoon. Not because something extraordinary happened. Nothing did. There was no dramatic goodbye. No sudden change. Just two people sitting inside a little bookstore, surrounded by old pages and quiet sunlight. And somehow that was enough. Life continued. Noah grew older. Sarah's bookstore became a place people loved to visit. Ethan stayed close. Sometimes he helped repair the shelves. Sometimes he brought coffee. Sometimes he and Sarah would sit outside after closing and talk about everything and nothing. They never tried to give their story a name. They simply lived it. One autumn evening, Ethan opened the cedar drawer again. Inside were all the letters. His mother's, his father's, Sarah's, and the letter he had written to his younger self. He noticed one envelope at the very bottom. It was addressed to him. The handwriting was Sarah's. He opened it. Ethan, if you are reading this, then many years have passed. I hope life has been kind to you. I hope you remember that we once thought losing each other was the worst thing that could happen. We were wrong. The worst thing would have been never finding the truth, because the truth gave us something the past never could. A choice. We could choose to remain angry. We could choose to live inside old memories. Or we could choose to forgive, not forget, not pretend nothing happened. Just forgive. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for reading every letter. And thank you for writing one of your own. Ethan smiled. At the bottom of the page was one final sentence. Some letters are never sent because we are waiting for the right person to read them. He folded the letter carefully. Then he walked downstairs. Sarah was sitting on the porch, watching the evening sky. Ethan sat beside her. She looked at him. Everything okay? He nodded. Everything is okay. She leaned against his shoulder. The street was quiet. A light rain began falling, soft against the roof. Ethan listened to it. It sounded exactly like the night he had opened the wooden box. Only now, the feeling was different. Back then, the rain had sounded like the past. Tonight, it sounded like peace. Ethan closed his eyes. He thought about every letter that had been hidden, every word that had arrived too late, every moment that could never be recovered. Then he understood something. Life was not made from the words we managed to say perfectly. It was made from all the moments when we finally found the courage to say them. He looked at Sarah. Do you remember what you wrote on your first letter? She smiled. What did it say? Sarah thought for a moment. That I hoped you'd remember me. Ethan smiled. I did. The rain continued softly around them. And beneath the quiet evening sky, Ethan finally understood the meaning of all those forgotten letters. They had never really been about the past. And sometimes the words we never sent are the very words that teach us how to live. Thank you for listening to this story from Lifeline. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to breathe, relax, and let the words stay with you. Subscribe to Lifeline for more stories, and we'll meet again in the next one. Good night and take care.